fifth place today, we're kicking things off with the Mattagami Bigfoot. For those of y'all who are unaware with the area, it's located roughly 6.5 hours north of Toronto, and it's a sweet little community. I personally grew up about 3 hours away from it, so I'm feeling pretty qualified to talk about the area today and provide some additional geographical context where needed. This tale actually begins around 20 years ago when our anonymous narrator purchased property on the lake, which is a very common cottage and vacation spot. He had grown up spending summers in the area and describes himself as very knowledgeable about wildlife noises. Around 9:15 at night, right about when darkness was starting to take over, our narrator and his wife were sitting by the fire, facing the vast woods on their property, when his wife decided to go inside for the evening, probably to avoid mosquito bites. Those are brutal up there. He was staring at the fire alone when he heard what he described as 3 whacks about a kilometer away, and didn't really think about it until around 15 minutes later when he heard the sound again, but closer. Originally he assumed it was the sound of a moose hitting their antlers against a tree, but it was too early in the year for that to be a thing. Being barely able to see the tree line through the darkness, our witness heard the noise again after another 15 minutes. But, you guessed it, closer. Not having anything to arm himself with and only a pen flashlight, he fled into the cottage as the whacks came again, and even closer this time. The whacks were never heard once he was inside the house that night, but happened often at night over the next decade. Now, I know, 2023. The most recent event was just last weekend when our witness was hosting a get-together to open the cottage for the season. It may seem early, but some northerners are really eager for cottage season, especially since they get such cold up there. All of his neighbors were present when they heard a bone-chilling scream from less than 100 yards from where they were standing, causing everyone to pause in shock and wonder what they were hearing. Soon after, the same type of scream was heard deeper in the forest, almost as if it were answering the first scream. After scouring the internet and listening to a wide variety of animal sounds, nothing matched what our witness heard. His property is water access only, which means the chances of, a random stranger pulling a prank or drunk debauchery are ruled out from possible logical reasoning. My last 2 cents on this point as a former northern girl, I've heard some weird stuff in the woods when I'd be, camping at a provincial park with my family as a kid, but nothing like that. Kinda glad now that I never really went exploring on my own. In 4th place, we have the most recent sighting of Nessie. For the uninitiated, Nessie is the preferred nickname of the Loch Ness Monster, located in Loch Ness, Scotland. Yeah, it might have been obvious to some, but I like to make sure we all know what I'm talking about. Spottings of our girl go all the way back to 565 AD, making her a grown woman at this point in time. Tied with Bigfoot for the most common cryptid being spotted, she's extremely popular, but quite the recluse at the same time. The most recent spotting is the first from this year, and I'm sure there will be plenty more to come. In early March, Nessie enthusiast Gevaudan couldn't believe what he saw when he was monitoring a webcam video of the lake from his home. 2 separate clips captured something stirring in the mysterious depths close to shoreline lodges, near Fort Augustus on the loch's southern shore. He described that he almost couldn't believe what he was seeing, and it all happened so fast. In the first video clip, something moves on the surface for a couple of seconds, then you see 2 shadowy wakes moving in 2 lines under the surface, moving to the left around 15 feet before disappearing. Yowie estimated the wake was roughly 6 to 8 feet long, believing the water was too agitated for the disturbance to have been caused by a fish. Now, this is the first confirmed sighting of Nessie in over 7 months, breaking the drought of Nessie news. Maybe she was just hibernating? Can't say I blame her. Look at the weather some days. In 3rd place, time to talk about fairies. Now, while I like to think of them like helpful beings with multicolored hair and stunning wings, sadly the reality isn't all sugar plums and sweetness. American soldier Sam Barrett is a self-professed family man and comes from a long line of military personnel and is currently deployed on a peacekeeping mission. The location of his story has been changed for safety, so while I'm not quite sure where he's stationed for this, he describes the current climate as always raining or foggy. And at the time of this filming, yeah, ditto. One night this past February, while retrieving a cache of buried weapons, he and his platoon noticed some lights in the forest that were far away, but close enough to be seen with the naked eye. Sam described it as 10 small lights, all moving erratically. Another member of his group began to hear what sounded like 2 people whispering in a language none of the group could understand. It was very quiet at first, but then it started to gain in frequency until it sounded like they were whispering right next to his ear. Soon, 10 more voices joined in the whispering, but all speaking at the same time. The men began to panic, believing the lights to be a distraction, which was a common tactic used by local enemies, and that they would soon be ambushed. Caleb, a teammate and good friend of Sam's, suddenly started speaking very loudly. It seemed as though he was trying to communicate with his father, who had passed 2 years earlier, and dropped all of his belongings before running towards the lights. Sam assumed that his friend had lost it, or the enemy was playing with their minds. Fearing for Caleb and worrying he might give up their position, Sam chased after him. Caleb just kept repeating, "I'm coming, Father," as he sprinted towards the lights. And as they got closer, the lights got bigger, and Sam found it odd that he couldn't make out any definition in them. There was nobody or nothing behind them, nothing man-made or otherwise. They just looked like lights floating in midair. Caleb was now on his knees with his arms at his sides and directly in front of the lights. He seemed to be in some sort of a trance, and despite Sam's attempts to snap him out of it, he just kept talking to his father and directly to the lights. Eventually, the commander of the team arrived, observing Caleb and then the lights before muttering, "The fairies have him." Oh. Okay, not ominous at all. Caleb eventually passed out and the lights disappeared almost instantly. After being carried back to their base and returning to consciousness, Caleb had zero recollection of what had happened, not only that evening, but the entire day was a blank. Okay, so maybe I don't want to meet a real fairy anymore. In second place, we have a spotting of not deer. Now, I have to say, I was definitely chuckling a bit at first reading about this cryptid friend, seeing as where I'm from, that's just another way to lead into conversation about seeing a moose on the highway. And while the thought of driving within eyesight of a moose is scary enough, not deer are actually scarier. This report comes from high school student Elias Merritt in Roanoke, Virginia. Describing the time of day as almost dark, he was waiting for his dad to pick him up after a basketball game when he experienced a feeling of something or someone watching him. He turned around suddenly and saw what he described as the shadow of a man behind a bush, which caused him to flee to the other side of the street, hiding in an area where he felt safer, but could still see if his ride was arriving. As he stood in this new position, Elias saw two deer along the edge of the woods and watched them as they moved, observing that one of the deer seemed to have a bad back leg or was injured. He walked in their direction to get a better look and see if he could help, but as he got closer, he realized they weren't deer and froze, petrified. The beings had oddly shaped heads and appeared to have patches of hair stitched over human skin. Both of the creatures looked into the direction of Elias and slowly stood up on their back legs and began running towards him, chasing him to the point where he was simply running and yelling in the direction of his home, no longer worried about waiting for his ride. Eventually coming across his dad, he jumped in the vehicle and was so panicked that all he could utter was, "Go, go, 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 go," unable to speak normally. Thankfully, his dad didn't prod, and the boy was able to tell his tale to both of his parents once he calmed down at home. Later that evening, Elias's dad sat down with him and explained that several years ago, he had had a similar experience while hunting in the forests outside of town, with his descriptions of the creatures being almost identical to what Elias had seen. Now, not to sound like a broken record, but I'm really glad I've never been the hiking type. Coming in first place, we have the Beast of Bladenboro, over in North Carolina, in the town of, anyone want to guess? You got it. There was a series of animal deaths back in the winter of 1953 to 54 that were highly suspicious, with plenty of skeptics discussing possible predatory animals as the cause, but locals claim it was the fault of a unique predator that still roams the forest to this day and can be spotted anywhere between Bladen Lake State Forest to the Green Swamp Preserve area, which is around 3 counties and 1,225 square miles, making it a fairly sized hunting ground. This spotting in particular takes place in early March, when experienced hunter Zach Kennedy was in the Green Swamp Preserve area when it started getting dark, which is when you have to leave the area in accordance with local law. Making his way through the swamp and bush towards his truck, he heard a strange noise and paused to listen closer, believing it to be a black bear. When he stopped, the unknown being stopped, and when he walked, it also walked. Now, Zach said it made him nervous, no kidding, because whatever it was knew he was there and wouldn't be running off. He said he started making noise and even set off a warning with his personal firearm. Now, unlike an actual bear would, this creature didn't leave, but instead let out a growl. Zach said you could feel as much as hear. A hard pass. When he came out of the woods and onto the dirt road where his pickup was within sight, Zach made the decision to try and run to his truck since whatever it was still following him. Creature soon began running as well, with Zach comparing the sound to a bulldozer crashing through the woods, and when it was out of the woods, it sounded like a horse running through loose dirt. He could hear the stomps of its feet and the growling in its breath, and released another round behind himself, hoping it would scare the being enough to stop for a moment and give Zach a chance to make it to the truck. The creature screamed behind him, and Zach thought the scream came from a human, causing him to turn around and clearly see the creature for the first time. He described it as jet black, as big as a 600-pound black bear, with a tail as long as its body and eyes that were glowing red. Zach bolted the rest of the way to the truck and jumped in, and had barely locked the door before the beast was pressed up against the window, with its breathing fogging up the glass. The creature then moved to the front of the truck, and while standing on all 4 legs, was eye level with Zach in his pickup. It chased Zach as he drove as quickly as he could for quite some time, before eventually stopping and staring as Zach continued his escape. Now, the next day, he and his dad went back and looked around for tracks, red bodily fluids, any evidence at all. He said there was no red fluid to be seen, even though he knows it was, shot, and there were paw prints as big as his hands on the ground everywhere. They then found a tree that had claw marks around an inch deep in the wood and spaced 4 inches apart from each other around 9 feet up. Now, the men didn't venture into the woods, nor did they go too far from the truck, describing the feeling of being hunted and not wanting a repeat of the day before or worse. They got back in the truck to leave and heard a scream that made all of the hair on their body stand straight, deciding then and there to leave and take a hiatus from hunting for this season.
Number 5, Bigfoot. It feels a little strange trying to say anything about Bigfoot because, he's like the most easily recognizable and cited cryptid in North America and maybe all over the world. I find it very interesting how many cultures across the globe have a variation on a giant bipedal ape-like creature. There's the Yeti of the Himalayas, the Australians have the Yowie, and I'm pretty sure about a dozen others. It's a very ancient cryptid, with its origins being difficult to trace back. It's one of our oldest stories as a people, actually. Some of the earliest stories ever come from indigenous tribes telling these stories of giant, hairy, bipedal creatures that would live in the forest. If you've ever wondered where the name Sasquatch comes from, it's an Anglicization of Sasquatch, a shape-shifting creature originating from the Thitsales people of Vancouver, described as being a giant ape-like creature that could take the shape of different creatures. Which I guess would kind of explain how the thing is so good at hiding if it's always turning into something else when we're trying to get footage of it. Now, the term Bigfoot came about sometime in the 1950s. Jerry Crew was a lumberjack working in Humboldt County when he discovered a set of large 16-inch footprints sunk deep within the mud of the Six Rivers forest where he was working at the time. He told his coworkers about this odd occurrence, with many of them claiming that they'd seen similar tracks on previous sites, reporting too of various things they couldn't explain, like a 450-pound oil drum going missing in the middle of the night. You know how often that happens, you look one way and then your 450-pound drum is gone. The men gave a name to this mystery creature that they perceived was harassing them and called it Bigfoot on, well, account of the big feet. Sometimes the origin is exactly what you think it's going to be. From here, once a local paper picked it up, the story of Bigfoot spread across the country, referencing this mystery creature leaving tracks in California. It was this, combined with the famous footage in 1972, that cemented Bigfoot as a cryptid with staying power. Now, I'm referring to the Patterson-Gimlin film, named after the filmmakers. You've definitely seen it if you're interested in cryptids at all. It's less than 50 seconds, and it's some of the most famous cryptid footage of all time. It's a very short clip. Everyone recognizes that classic Bigfoot walk. To date, it's never been officially debunked, and the men who recorded the capture went to their graves insisting there was no hoax present. Now, the existence of Bigfoot is still hotly debated, and honestly probably will be forever unless we ever get some concrete proof, unless Bigfoot ever comes out and holds a press conference. Wherever he is or wherever they are, I hope Sasquatches, Yetis, Yowies, Big Feet, I hope they're chillin'. Probably annoying dealing with paparazzi all the time, and you know what? Let them live in peace. If they want to come to us, they'll come to us. And while you're waiting for that Bigfoot press conference to happen, if you're looking for more cryptid content, Top 5 Scary is the place to be. We've got all of that and then some. If cryptids aren't your jam, we got aliens, conspiracies, true crime, fake crime, basically anything scary under the sun and above it. So stay subscribed, don't miss a single scream, but do that after this video, okay? Wait till the credits. Alright, moving on. Number 4, Thunderbird. Our next critter is going to be the Thunderbird. Nope, nothing to do with the sick classic car, although it's a mean ride. The Thunderbird is a creature that appears across many cultures, mostly indigenous groups alongside the Pacific Coast and Great Lakes area, all telling similar stories of these enormous, larger-than-life birds of prey. Now, these vary anywhere from stories of, just like a really big bird that would be scary, or sometimes Thunderbirds are more mythical, capable of impressive powers like thunder striking when they flap their wings, which is why they're called Thunderbird. Thunderbird, Bigfoot, sometimes the name of a cryptid really informs what they do. Tribes would tell stories about Thunderbirds to explain natural occurrences like storms or changes in weather or drought, famine, all those things. It's much easier to blame your problems on a big bird than anything else. Now, although they were thought to be dangerous, Thunderbirds were also seen as a benevolent nature spirit, and they would assist the tribe sometimes in searching of food during periods of famine. So they're not all bad, it's a Thunderbird to Thunderbird Thunderbird case basis. Now, it wouldn't be a good cryptid list unless we had a few sightings instead of just stories. So, we're going to talk about one incident in particular with the Thunderbird, the 1977 Lawndale incident. This occurred when a young boy, one Marlon Lowe, was playing outside when he was attacked by two large birds, one of which allegedly began to carry the boy away until the boy's mother ran to his rescue. Eyewitnesses who'd seen the incident taking place claimed the birds were 4.5 feet long with a wingspan of 10 feet, which is pretty incredible. A 6-inch hooked bill, 3 sharp claws, and a large black body, not really resembling any local birds. So what was it? Thunderbird coming down to swoop up prey? Real life Pokemon? Sounds a bit like a starling. Also, a big shout out to that kid's mom. Imagine that power dynamic. Anytime he's acting up, you can remind him of the time you saved him from getting eaten by a giant bird. Oh, that'll get him mowing the lawn for sure. Number 3, Cryptid. One of my favorite genres of cryptid or mythical creature is just a regular animal, but big. I mean, that's what the Thunderbird was. Maybe that's evident because the last 2 creatures that I spoke of on this list was a big ape and a big bird, respectively. Can we keep that trend going? Of course. Now, this list has been a little North American centric so far, so our next entry is going to be the Cryptid, a Japanese cryptid that is basically just a giant octopus. They don't all have to have powers, they don't all have to be complicated, sometimes you can summarize them just like that. It's sort of like the Japanese equivalent to the Kraken, the other really big name in the giant octopi scene. The Cryptid is a giant octopus god that is said to reside in Hokkaido's Uchira Bay. It's said to be big enough to swallow a ship whole. Its crimson body turns the sky and water red when it swims through. Old fishermen used to tell stories that when the seas or skies would turn red, that meant the Cryptid was there and you should just avoid that general area. The fishing's gonna be no good. You're gonna get eaten by a giant octopus. Now, the origin of this legend is the best part of this cryptid. He's got some great lore. The legends state that near the mountains near the village of Rebungi, there lived a gigantic spider by the name of Yaushika. His gigantic red body stretched over the mountains. One day, he descended, he was feeling frisky, and attacked the people in the village of Rebungi. He shook the earth as he walked, destroying everything in his path. Now, the villagers were terrified of him because he's a giant spider, and prayed to their gods to save him. The god of the sea, Repunkami, heard the prayers and pulled the giant spider into the sea, where its body was contorted and twisted into the shape of the Cryptid, the monstrous octopus. Started as a spider, ended as an octopus. That's an icky way to live. That guy's just always been icky. Number 2, Bunyip. Coming in at the number 2 spot for today is going to be the Bunyip, which from the name alone, you might be forgiven for thinking it sounds kind of cute. You know, you close your eyes, Bunyip. That almost sounds like it's wanting to be an adorable little rabbit Pokemon or something, if only. Also, there's a lot of Pokemon references in this video. I got it on the brain, clearly. Gotta catch them all. I think I'm just sad because Ash and Pikachu retired. Anyway, the Bunyip is a creature from Aboriginal Australian folklore. Its name literally means devil or evil spirit, translated from the Wemba Wemba language. The Bunyip is an aquatic predator with many varying descriptions. Sometimes it's described as kind of looking like a hippo, sometimes it looks like a cross between like a cat dog, and sometimes it's just an incomprehensible, scary, snake-like twisty monster thing. All that's common across all of these depictions is that it's a scary thing that lives in the water. Over the years, there have been a number of reported sightings or findings of mysterious bones in southern Australia that led early settlers and colonists to believe that the Bunyip was a new creature out waiting to be discovered. It inhabits swamps, rivers, and lakes, lurking for prey. Now, the first recorded sighting of it by Australian settlers can be traced back to 1851, when a tracing of the creature's body was discovered near a riverbank in Ararat, Victoria. Local hunters had speared an unknown beast and made an imprint of the creature's body to remember it by, because, you know, if you found something weird, you'd want to remember it. They described it as 11 paces long and 4 paces wide in an extreme depth. Now, sadly, this outline no longer exists. They didn't use permanent marker, but it was enough to spur an interest and a hunt for this possibly mythical, possibly real creature. The Bunyip seems like it could have been a real strange step in aquatic evolution. Could not even begin to guess what it was really, or whatever it was they had found that day, so probably just safe for us to assume that it was a cryptid and there could be more Bunyip out there lurking and waiting. And number 1, Ogopogo. Coming in at the number 1 spot is going to be a local favorite of ours, Canada's very own Ogopogo. Yes, I'm a little biased, I had to include a local cryptid at the end of this one. Much like Bigfoot, almost every culture's folklore includes some variant of a sea monster. The most famous among them is probably the Loch Ness Monster, the fabled plesiosaur that lives deep beneath Loch Ness in Scotland. Ogopogo is kind of like the Canadian version of that. Ogopogo chills up in Kelowna, British Columbia, and is tied deeply to the native folklore surrounding this area. The Okanagan natives revered a creature they called the Nataika, or Nahatik, which translates to a few things, but all come out meaning roughly the same thing, you know? Water demon, water god, sacred creature of the water. If you're not getting this across, important thing that's wet. Nataika was a demanding lake god, and it was thought that in order to ensure safe passage, locals would have to sacrifice a small animal, a pig, a chicken, and others, into the lake to appease the hungry lake monster. The threat of a lake monster dragging victims to the bottom really kept people in line. Now, it should be worth noting that there is some good evidence and a bit of pushback from native groups to suggest that the demonic view of the lake spirit actually came from European settlers, and that to the Okanagan people, the Nahatiko was a fairly benign spirit that actually protected the valley and was kind of a cool guy. Now, all those names, where does it eventually become Ogopogo? The rather silly sounding name sounds more like it's a toy. Well, a children's song from the 1930s was the first place to ever refer to this sea creature as Ogopogo, describing it in the lyrics as, his mother was an earwig, father was a whale, a little bit of head, hardly in a tail, and Ogopogo was his name. That's as much singing as you're ever getting out of me. Over the years, much like Nessie, there have been numerous possible sightings of Ogopogo seeing something strange in the water that can't always be easily explained. Many people believe that Ogopogo could be like an otter or a seal or something that's always getting misattributed, but the legend is very much alive. Ogopogo has become a bit of a mascot for the city of Kelowna, with the statue of it serving as a popular photo op for tourists. So please, if you're ever in the area, snap a pic with Ogopogo. He loves it, he loves the press, and you don't even have to sacrifice a chicken to him anymore.
Kicking off at number 5, the Silver Woman. And this story comes from a police motorway patrol woman from Portsmouth, England, who explains that her career regularly confronts her with situations that are both bizarre and unnerving. But this one kind of takes the cake. On the 25th of November around 6:30 PM during a routine speed camera setup in the Portsmouth city centre, her speed trap began picking up random tracings of non-existent objects in pitch black darkness, hurtling past her vehicle at around 30 to 40 miles per hour. Now, I know what you might be thinking, the device was obviously malfunctioning, but that wasn't the case, and our police officer had already thought of that. She trained the camera manually back onto the road surface to see what had been picked up, and she was shocked to discover that on the screen was what could only be described as humanoid figures running up and down the street at about 40 feet ahead of the vehicle. Strangely enough, they seemed to have a silver appearance to them, almost shimmering and translucent. She looked out of the window and again, nothing was there, but when she looked back at the screen, about 10 feet away from the vehicle was one of the same silvery entities standing motionless, facing away from the van, hulking and breathing in a strange fashion, as if they were weighing up taking on the police officer. What were they? Well, we'll never know, and when she played the tape back for her fellow officers, the silvery entities were nowhere to be seen. Yeah, I've got no clue about this one. Coming in at number 4, the Folk Monster. Now, Bigfoot is obviously the heavy hitter of the cryptid world. People have devoted their entire lives to hunting down the elusive mountain creature, stretching all the way across the wildlands of North America, as well as similar instances across the planet, but there is one little town in America that seems to be the hotspot for these sightings: Folk, Arkansas, and in 1971 it became the scene of its most terrifying legend. Meet Bobby Ford, a man who vehemently claims he's seen Bigfoot, or a version of it, describing it as 7 feet tall, ridiculously fast, and covered in long brown hair. And he saw it up close and personal. It was a Saturday when Bobby and his brother were out hunting a short distance from their rural home when they heard screams in the distance. Bobby's wife, Elizabeth Ford, was frozen in horror when a creature reached through the front window, massive and hairy with glowing red eyes that made no sound except for heavy breathing. When Bobby and his brother ran back to the home, the creature turned and grabbed him as he sprinted up to the porch. It tackled him to the ground with ease and then disappeared into the woodland. The creature had left behind clear tracks in the house and nearby area 3-toed footprints that matched the deep 3-fingered scratches that were made in the wood of the front porch. Bobby Ford was rushed to hospital and treated for minor wounds and shock, and the family were so terrified by the encounter that they moved out. They'd only lived there a week. That's terrible timing. Next up at number 3, the Grey Man of Ben Macdui. Ben Macdui in Gaelic, Mountain of the Son of Duff, is an awe-inspiring peak of the Scottish Highlands, staking the claim as one of Britain's highest mountains and the highest of the Cairngorms National Park. It's been scaled by countless people throughout history, but there are those that claim that there's something more sinister living out on the mountain. The Grey Man of Ben Macdui, and it doesn't like visitors. The creature is said to be at least 20 feet tall, and one eyewitness of the creature's presence, a respected professor and mountain climber named Norman Colley, said that he was first aware of something following him during his ascent after hearing strange footsteps behind him. Alone, isolated on the mountain, something was following him. And it wasn't human. The footsteps were laborious and delayed, as if that whatever was following him was much taller than he was. When he saw it, he described the Grey Man as vaguely human shaped, brown in hue and fur, and shrouded in a strange grey mist. In 1945, a similar thing happened to a renowned mountain climber named Peter Densham, who described the exact same encounter with the exact same creature. Again in 1958, the Scots magazine wrote of a similar account from naturalist Alexander Tunion, who this time found himself armed with a rifle and fired several rounds into the Grey Man. He thought he'd hit it, whatever it was, but after trekking over through the snow, found no sign of the creature. It vanished away like fog rolling across a mountain, and the mystery of the Grey Man of Ben Macdui remains unsolved. Swinging in at number 2, the Cabbagetown Tunnel Monster, which is an urban legend from my current stomping grounds of Toronto, Ontario, that is grounded in such bizarre circumstances that it remains a warning not to go wandering through the dark tunnels of downtown Toronto. I'm talking about the path. Ever. Don't go there. In 1978, in the eastern Cabbagetown district of Toronto, a 51-year-old man known as Ernest had a terrifying encounter in the network of tunnels that sprawl beneath the city. He had been out searching the neighbourhood for a missing kitten that him and his wife had been raising when he stumbled across a tunnel entrance and decided to explore. After venturing 10 feet into the gloom, Ernest suddenly came across a creature that looked somewhat like a long, thin monkey, around 3 feet in height, with large teeth and covered in grey fur. It had unsettling eyes, he described, that peered out of the darkness in a bright orange hue. Even more unsettling, Ernest claimed that the creature spoke to him. "Go away, go away," it said in a hissing voice before slinking down a tunnel off onto the side. Ernest was reluctant to come forward with his story. He was a respected member of the community and he feared that he'd be ridiculed by his peers, but after being convinced by a friend, he spoke to the Toronto Sun, and a group of journalists and investigators followed him into the same tunnel. Although they didn't see the creature, they did see that the narrow tunnel led to a strange, gloomy chasm that dropped into the unseen sewer system below. And even stranger, they found the maimed, half-eaten carcass of a cat buried loosely beneath the dirt and debris. It permeated the legend of the Cabbagetown Tunnel Monster, and whatever it was, we may never know for sure. Just stay away. And finally, our number 1 spot, the Jersey Devil. Of course, it has to be perhaps one of the most notorious cryptids of all time, the famed Devil of Jersey, whose origin dates all the way back to when New Jersey was still a British colony. Hundreds upon hundreds of tales have been spawned from the legend of the Jersey Devil, dating from the early 1700s right up to recent times. As the legend goes, Mrs. Jane Leeds came from a poor family who carved out an existence in the bleak pine barrens of Jersey, a rugged place with dense forests, sandy soil and deep swamps. In 1735, Mrs. Leeds discovered that she was pregnant with her 13th child, which is, as they say, unlucky for some. Now, Mrs. Leeds wasn't too keen on giving birth, to say the least, and she claimed to friends and relatives that the devil can take the next one. And that's exactly what he did. When the baby was born, it was monstrous, with a scaly reptilian body, a horse's head, bat's wings, and a long forked tail. He spread his wings, shot up out of the chimney, and soared out across the pine barrens. The legend of the Jersey Devil was born. Now, whatever you think of this cryptid, truth, or urban legend, it's the frequency that the Jersey Devil appears in contemporary folklore that is important. Hundreds of people have reported sightings of a strange, bat-like creature with wings and a forked tail, flapping its wings across the pine barrens and cackling into the night. In 1816, Joseph Bonaparte, the brother of Napoleon, reported seeing the creature while hunting game in the woods. In 1840, a respected minister pointed his congregation towards a ghastly creature flapping above his church, and in 1909, literally thousands of people saw the same creature on the same day at the same time at multiple locations. In fact, it got so bad that schools had to close down and people just flat out refused to go outside. And still, to this day, New Jersey natives will warn you to tread carefully in the Pine Barrens. Kicking off at number 5, the Loveland Frogmen. Hailing from the misty swamps and vast wetlands of rural Ohio, the Loveland Frogmen, also affectionately known as the Loveland Lizards, are a cryptid unlike no other and have reportedly appeared under several bizarre circumstances on a regular basis in Ohio's Clermont County. Allegedly, the first sightings of these eerie bipedal amphibians first occurred in 1955 and has proven to be one of the most intriguing cryptozoological mysteries in North America. The creatures themselves allegedly live in the temperate forests and wetlands of Clermont County and are able to survive the cold winters of the region without having to hibernate. Useful. During their first sighting at approximately 3:30 AM, a local businessman was driven down a lonely stretch of road, running alongside the Miami River on the outskirts of the small town known as Loveland, Ohio. Suddenly and out of nowhere, the man claimed to have witnessed 3 bipedal quasi-reptilian entities emerge from the dense reeds and begin to congregate by the side of the road. The man slowed down and turned out his lights as he pulled his car up to a curb to observe these creatures further. He claimed that they stood between 3 and 4 feet tall, were covered with leathery skin, and had webbed hands and feet. Their most distinguishing feature though was their distinctly frog-like head, which the man claimed bore deep wrinkles where their hair should have been. Well, since then, over 5 more sightings of the Loveland Frogmen have occurred over a 60-year period. What do you guys think? What's going on, Ohio? Next up at number 4, the nameless thing of Berkeley Square. And I absolutely love this story either way, because if you've ever heard of the famed 50 Berkeley Square in London, England, then you'll know that, cryptid or not, this place is terrifying enough. It's proof as well that there are some cases out there which irk on the realm of the paranormal and become a category so unexplainable that they don't really fit into anything, or can fit into anything. I don't know, it's pretty nebulous. Either way though, the haunted legacy of Berkeley Square has featured ghosts and poltergeists the world over, and it's widely considered to be one of the most haunted places in England. But there is one particular instance that takes the cake, the nameless thing of Berkeley Square. A tale that takes place in 1840 when a 20-year-old Sir Robert Warboys got into a drunken dare in which he had written off Berkeley Square and its paranormal reputation as a whole load of Kaiser Soze. He put money down that he could spend the night in the building's most cursed and haunted second floor, and so the next evening did exactly that, with a pistol in his hand. For robbers, I guess, and a makeshift pulley line attached to a bell in case he saw anything out of the ordinary. He drank a whole load of courage and tried to get some shut-eye, but well, of course, young Bobby Warboy's story cuts out there when the landlord was awoken by the bell rig ringing incessantly and ran upstairs to check on him. He found Robert Warboys dead as a doornail, slouched in the corner with his eyes bulging in terror. Legend has it that the landlord witnessed an amorphous, shadowy form with slime oozing from it, claws and tentacles and all dripping from its form, suddenly slink back into the shadows of the corner of the room and disappear. And since then, tales of the nameless thing of Berkeley Square are more common than any of us would actually like. Swinging in at number 3, the Kinderhook Blob, which is just a great name, really, isn't it? And if I'm being honest, the legend of the Kinderhook Blob is exactly what cryptid tales are made of, so strap in. It's sometime in 1962 New York, and on 6 separate occasions, multiple witnesses encountered a floating, mysterious blob-like creature that was so terrifying in its form that 2 men armed with shotguns fled in terror. The initial encounter was from a 10-year-old boy named Hallenbeck and his 7-year-old cousin Chari. They were playing in the dense woods nearby their house when all of a sudden they both heard this really high-pitched whistle noise, and suddenly, from behind a nearby pine tree, they witnessed a white amorphous object appear in full view, which slowly began writhing toward them. On 5 more occasions, which insanely would happen over the next 12 years, all the way until 1978, dozens of eyewitnesses would explain in vivid detail similar accounts of an amorphous white blob-like creature that would emerge from the woods, often attaching its tendrils to trees whilst incessantly making its way towards its victims, causing them to flee in terror. So much so that on one occasion 2 grown men tried blowing it to pieces with shotguns to no avail, and then turned tail and ran. What I love about this story is the essence of a cryptid tale. For all intents and purposes, the Kinderhook Blob could be a disused weather balloon floating listlessly through the air, but because it was seen multiple times by multiple people in the right setting, the legend of the terrifying white blob quickly became a horrifying reality. Either that, or it's a sentient alien life form that's going to consume us all, so Yeah. Coming in next at number 2, the disappearance of Peter Grayson. The Groot slang, or the Groot slang, which in Afrikaans loosely translates to big snake, is a legendary creature widely considered to be one of the continent's most prolific cryptids, and is reputed to dwell exclusively in the deep caves and cavernous systems in the Richtersveld, South Africa. According to legend, the Groot slang is a primordial creature that is reputedly as old as the world itself and dwells within what locals refer to as the bottomless pit, which also, conveniently enough, is also filled with precious diamonds. Well, diamonds historically have a proficiency of attracting daring adventurers, and one of those adventurers just so happened to be an English businessman known as Peter Grayson. In 1917, Grayson and a team of excavators began an expedition into the Richtersveld cave system, accompanied by several local guides. After heading out into the rocky desert landscape, and upon hearing that Grayson intended to descend into the bottomless pit, unwittingly the lair of the Groot slang, the local guides quickly left after warning Grayson that they'd lost friends and family to the violent serpent before, and they weren't going to do it again. He shrugged it off and alongside his 2 excavators headed deep into the cave, and well, that's the last that they heard of any of them. The Grayson dynasty faded into obscurity after their patriarch was never seen alive again, but as the legend goes, one of the local guides returned to the cave a day or so later after feeling guilty for abandoning Grayson and his team. At the entrance of the cave, he found the body of an excavator, half of his body actually, to be specific. His legs and most of his torso had been ripped clean off, and he died attempting to crawl back out. What a way to go. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the legend of Yowie Grando. And I just have to tell this cryptid story because it's one of my favourites, and it's also considered to be one of the first historical instances of vampirism. As the legend goes, Yowie Grando Eljovic was a villager and poor peasant from the region of Istria, which now makes up modern day Croatia. Historically, he was referred to as a strigoi, strigon or strigun, a local word for something that resembles a vampire and a warlock. Sometime around 1656, Yowie died due to an unknown illness, but according to legend, he regularly returned from the grave at night as a vampire to terrorize his village until his decapitation in 1672. The legend tells that for 16 years after his death, Yowie would rise from his grave by night and terrorize the village. The village priest Giorgio, who had buried Yowie 16 years previously, discovered that at night somebody would knock on the doors around the village, and on whichever door he knocked, someone from that house would die within the next few days. Eventually, the villagers rallied after witnesses saw the corpse of Yowie roaming the streets, and led by the town's mayor, chased and tried to kill him with a hawthorn stick, but failed to pierce his supernatural flesh. The next night, 9 people went to the graveyard and dug up Yuri's coffin, finding a perfectly preserved corpse with a smile on its face. It was Yuri with pristine white flesh and no signs of decomposition. They tried to stake him once more, but witnesses noted that the stick would not penetrate its flesh. Eventually, the villagers were so terrified and kind of fed up with his vampire antics that a brave villager known as Stipan Milicic took a saw and decapitated the corpse. As soon as it tore Yuri's skin, the vampire screamed and blood began gushing from the cut. Allegedly, a man that was presumed dead for 16 years. Yeah, that one's pretty worrying, right?
Coming in at 5, Wampus Cat. The Wampus Cat is a creature in American folklore and, according to legend, is a result of experimentation during World War II. Now, there are more than 22 million acres of forest in Alabama where you can find deadly and terrifying creatures. However, the one whispered about the most and discussed around campfires is the Wampus Cat. Early references by the American Dialect Society noted the Wampus Cat as, I quote, a creature heard whining about camps at night, and a mythical green-eyed cat having occult powers, or even an undefined imaginary animal. Now back to its creation. Allegedly, the US government tried to create a super animal by combining a mountain lion and a grey wolf through genetic splicing, with the goal of creating an incredibly fast and large creature to relay messages. However, things went wrong when a breeding pair escaped, and their descendants, known as the Wampus Cats, still haunt the area around Chihia Mountain in the Talladega National Forest. Folklorist Vance Randolph described the Wampus Cat as a kind of amphibious panther which leaps into the water and swims like a colossal mink. In Cherokee mythology, the monster is the cat-like embodiment of a female onlooker cursed by tribal elders as punishment for hiding beneath the pelt of a large wild cat to witness a sacred ceremony. The Wampus Cat is used as a mascot for numerous educational institutions. The Wampus Cat also has been referenced in pop culture numerous times, specifically by J.K. Rowling on her Pottermore site. In the story, History of Magic in North America, which lists the Wampus Cat as a source for hair used in magic wands. Pretty cool. Coming in at number 4, dire wolf. The dire wolf was an extinct species of the genus Canis and is one of the most famous prehistoric carnivorous in North America, along with its extinct competitor, the saber-toothed cat. Like I said, these creatures are extinct, however one user from Utah has a different story. I quote, "Not sure what it was called, but I listened to a podcast about cryptids and it talked about basically a modern day dire wolf/human combo that lived on a ranch somewhere in Utah. A family moved into an old ranch and noticed that all the windows and doors were tightly secured and that there had been wolf sightings years ago in that area. The new owner didn't think much of it until they found some dead cows with holes in them. No blood whatsoever. Then the owner saw what looked like a wolf from far away. The wolf creature basically ended up running up to him and he shoots it. The gun does no visible harm though, even though it made a hole in its shoulder. Then the wolf creature casually walks away. The guy ends up looking for one of his missing cows and finds it dead. He also finds a calf getting attacked by the thing and being carried off. If I remember correctly, he tries chasing it down and it outruns him on his horse. The guy doesn't know what he's up against, so he tells a local wildlife expert who shows him different species of wolves. They pass a picture of the creature and the wildlife expert tells him that it's a dire wolf and it hasn't been alive for thousands of years. That is absolutely insane. I'm a strong believer in the dire wolf and have a sneaking suspicion they are still lurking around here. Hunting somewhere, maybe hunting you. Coming in at number 3, El Chupacabra. Also known as the Chupacabra or Chupacabras, this name translates to goat sucker from chupa to suck and cabra, goat. This is a legendary creature in the folklore of parts of the Americas, with its first purported sighting in Puerto Rico. Now the name itself comes from the animal's reported habit of attacking and drinking the blood of livestock, including goats. Now the creature reportedly terrorizes the southwestern US, Puerto Rico and Mexico, with accounts on the size and shape ranging drastically. Some reports state it is the size of a large bear with spines running down its back, while others report the animal is small and hairless. Reportedly it can be found in a desert in North America covering over 200,000 miles. Now eyewitnesses have also claimed sightings in Maine as well as Chile, with sightings even occurring in Russia and the Philippines. Essentially no goat is safe. The first reported attack occurred in March 1995, 8 sheep being discovered dead, and each one of them with 3 puncture wounds in the chest area and reportedly drained of blood. I see a theme in this list. A few months later, in August, an eyewitness, Madeline Tolentino, reported seeing the creature in the Puerto Rican town of Canovanas, where as many as 150 farm animals and pets were reportedly killed. And in 1975, a similar incident occurred in the small town of Mocha, where it was initially believed the killings were committed by a satanic cult. However, later more killings were reported on the island, and many farms reported loss of animal life, forcing locals to believe that El Chupacabra was hunting their town. Reports and sightings have been noted up until last year, so what do you think? Are you a believer in the Chupacabra? I am. Even though I can't say the name very well. Coming in at number 2, Honey Island Swamp Monster. In Louisiana folklore, the Honey Island Swamp Monster is a creature said to have been seen in Honey Island Swamp since 1963. It is described as bipedal, 7 feet tall, with grey hair and yellow or red eyes, and accompanied by a disgusting smell. The first claimed sighting was in 1963 by Harlan Ford, a retired air traffic controller who had taken up wildlife photography. After his death in 1980, a reel of Super 8 film was discovered which showed the creature. In 1974, the monster gained national fame after Ford and his friend Billy Mills claimed to have found unusual footprints in the area, as well as the body of a wild boar whose throat had been cut. Ford continued to hunt for the creature for the next 6 years following that. Now in folklore, a legend tells of a train wreck in the area in the early 20th century. According to the legend, a travelling circus was on the train, and from it, a group of chimpanzees escaped and interbred with the local alligator population. 2 hunters emerged from the swamp in 1874 saying that they had. Creepy stuff indeed. And finally, coming in at number 1, Pukwudgie. A Pukwudgie is translated by Henry Schoolcraft as little wild man of the woods that vanishes. It is a creature often found in Delaware and Wampanoag folklore, sometimes said to be 4 to 5 feet tall. According to legend, Pukwudgie can appear and disappear at will, as well as lure people to their deaths, use magic, launch poison arrows, and create fire. Yeah, these dudes are not to be messed with. Now Now, some Native Americans believe that the Pukwudgie was once human, and presumably friends, but then turned against the Native Americans and are best left alone. According to lore, a person who pissed off a Pukwudgie would be subject to nasty tricks by it. Considering they are known to kidnap people, push them off cliffs, attack them with short knives and spears, I would just leave them alone. More interesting still, the Pukwudgie are actually mentioned in Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's epic poem, The Song of Hiawatha. I quote, "Far and wide among the nations spread the name and fame of Kwasin. No man dared to strive with Kwasing. But the mischievous Pukwudgie, they the envious little people, they the fairies and the pygmies, plotted and conspired against him." They have also been identified in the Harry Potter universe, with Rowling describing the creature as, I quote, "The Pukwudgie is also native to America, a short grey-faced, large-eared creature distinctly related to the European goblin. Fiercely independent, tricky, and not over fond of humankind. It possesses its own powerful magic. Pukwudgie hunt with deadly poisonous arrows and enjoy playing tricks on humans. Cool, but incredibly creepy." Coming in at 5, the Jersey Devil. In southern New Jersey, the Jersey Devil is a legendary creature that is said to inhabit the Pine Barrens of South Jersey. The creature is described as a flying biped with hooves, however there are many variations. The most common description is that of a kangaroo-like or wyvern-like creature with a goat or horse-like head. Leathery bat-like wings, horns, small arms with clawed hands, legs with cloven hooves, and a forked tail. It is often reported as moving quickly and emitting a high-pitched blood-curdling scream. Now, the legend originated with a Pine Barrens resident named Jane Leeds, known as Mother Leeds. The legend goes that Mother Leeds had 12 children, and after finding out she was pregnant for the 13th time, cursed the child in frustration, crying that the child would be the devil. During 1735, Mother Leeds was in labour on a stormy night while her friends gathered around her. Born as a normal child, the 13th child changed to a creature with hooves, a goat's head, bat wings, and a forked tail. The child then supposedly began flying around, wreaking havoc. Now, the legend certainly has some staying power, considering that nearly 200 years later, the devil became a big deal once again, this time in 1909. That January, reports of odd footprints being found in the snow on the roofs of houses caused such a panic that the devil was up to no good that mills and schools closed, and some people were too scared to leave their homes. Since then, the Jersey Devil has been to blame for most strange happenings around New Jersey, and in 1960, Camden's merchants even offered a $10,000 bounty to anyone who would capture the mischievous devil, but of course they never received any takers. It's also mischievous. We Brits know what's right. Coming in at 4, Bunnyman. The Bunnyman is an urban legend that originated after 2 incidents in Fairfax County, Virginia, back in 1970. The legend, like many others, has multiple variations, most involving a man wearing a rabbit costume who attacks people with an axe or hatchet. Now, most of the stories hail from a southern railway overpass spanning Colchester Road near Clifton, Virginia, often referred to as Bunnyman Bridge. The legend surfaced after Fairfax County Public Library historian and archivist Brian A. Conley extensively researched the Bunnyman legend. He located 2 incidents of a man in a rabbit costume threatening people with an axe, the reports occurring 10 days apart in 1970. Now, the second reported sighting occurred on the evening of October 29th, 1970, when construction worker Paul Phillips approached a man standing on the porch of an unfinished home in Kings Park West. According to Phillips, the man was wearing a grey, black and white bunny costume and was about 20 years old. He began chopping at a porch post with a long-handled axe, saying, "You are trespassing. If you come any closer, I'll chop off your head." Spooky. Rumors spread like wildfire, with the Washington Post even reporting on the legends, mentioning the multiple incidents, including man in bunny costume sought in Fairfax October 22nd, 1970. The rabbit reappears October 31st, 1970. Bunnyman seen November 4th, 1970. Bunnyman reports are multiplying November 6th, 1970. Not just that, but in 1973, a student at the University of Maryland College Park submitted a research paper that chronicled precisely 54 variations on the 2 incidents. Coming in at 3, Goatman. Also known as the Pope Licker, this is a legendary part man, part goat and part sheep creature, reported to live beneath a railroad trestle bridge over Pope Lick Creek in the Fisherville area of Louisville, Kentucky. Now, numerous legends exist about the creature's origins and the methods it employs to claim its victims. According to some reports, the creature uses either hypnosis or voice mimicry to lure passers-by onto the trestle to meet their death before over an oncoming train. Other stories, however, claim the monster jumps down from the trestle onto the roofs of cars passing beneath it. Other legends state it attacks its victims with blood-stained axe, and that the very sight of the creature is enough to drive people to leap off the high trestle themselves. The monster was the subject of a 1988 film by director Ron Schlichtner called The Legend of the Pope-Lick Monster, with the majority of the movie being shot at the Pope-Lick Trestle. Now, it has been confirmed that several people have died on or near the train trestle at Pope Creek in pursuit of the monster, and on April 23, 2016, a 26-year-old tourist from Ohio died after being hit by a train while searching for the creature. Coming in at number 2, Mothman. Hailing from West Virginia folklore, the Mothman is a creature reportedly seen in the Point Pleasant area from November 12, 1966 to December 15, 1967. On November 12th, 5 men who were digging a grave at a cemetery near Clendenin, West Virginia, claimed to have seen a man-like figure fly low from the trees over their heads. This is confirmed to be the first known sighting of what became known as the Mothman. Not long after, on November 15, 1966, 2 young couples from Point Pleasant told the police they saw a large grey creature whose eyes glowed red when their car headlights picked it up. They would go on to describe it as a large flying man with 10-foot wings, following their car while they were driving in an area outside of town known as TNT area, the site of a former World War II munitions plant. Following these sightings, more quickly began to occur, one that took place at the Silver Bridge, which would later go on to collapse, resulting in the death of 46 people, with the incident giving rise to the legend of the Mothman. Now, the Mothman was eventually introduced to a larger audience by Gray Barker in 1970 in his book The Mothman Prophecies, which would later be adapted into a movie in 2002 starring Richard Gere. Wasn't the best, but still worth a watch. Point Pleasant held its first annual Mothman Festival in 2002, when a 12-foot tall metallic statue of the creature was unveiled in 2003. Not too shabby. And finally, coming in at number 1, the skunk ape. Now, these cryptids could be lurking almost anywhere around the south, but they have a particular tendency to pop up around Florida. The skunk ape, also known as swamp cabbage man, swamp ape, stink ape, Florida Bigfoot, Louisiana Bigfoot, Myakka ape, swamp squatch, and Myakka skunk ape, is a humanoid creature said to inhabit Florida, as well as North Carolina and Arkansas, and is named for its appearance and for the unpleasant odor that is said to occupy it. Now, reports began back in the 60s and 70s, with one sighting in 74 describing a foul-smelling, hairy ape-like creature which ran upright on 2 legs around the suburban neighborhoods of Dade County. Skeptical investigator Joe Nickel has written in the past that some of the reports may represent sightings of the black bear, and it is likely that other sightings are mere hoaxes or misidentification of wildlife. Now, while the National Park Service has dismissed the existence of skunk apes as a myth, local residents remain adamant that their fragrant primates occasionally appear to terrorize their pets.
In at number 5, we have the Jersey Devil. Known to exist in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, the Jersey Devil is often described as having hooves. A snake's tail, bat wings, and a head that looks something like a horse. There have been many sightings throughout history of the Jersey Devil, with the cryptid dating all the way back to the 1700s and continuing on until the past decade. It is said that the Jersey Devil often glows and can breathe fire or poison water with its breath. Throughout folklore, it is also known as the Leeds Devil, with local residents tracing its origins to a woman named Mother Leeds, the mistress of a British soldier who was suspected of being a witch. When she gave birth to her 13th child, she cursed it. The baby was born as a hairy creature and soon began terrorizing the town and its people, even eating children. Now, like I said, there have been many sightings throughout history. On July 27, 1937, an unknown animal with red eyes seen by residents of Downingtown, Pennsylvania, was compared to the Jersey Devil by a reporter for the Pennsylvania Bulletin of July 28, 1937. In 1951, a group of Gibbstown, New Jersey boys claimed to have seen a monster matching the devil's description, and claims of a corpse matching the Jersey Devil's description arose in 1957. Now, many choose to ignore the Jersey Devil, with it thought to be an undiscovered species of animal, generally classified as living pre-pterodactyl. Coming in at number 4, we have Yowie. Yowie, also known as Yehu, Yowie, hairy man, or Yahoo is a fanged humanoid creature or great ape featured in Aboriginal mythology along with Australian raptors or Burrinjaw. It is considered to be the Australian Bigfoot and contains many primate-like features, indicating that it is an undiscovered species of great ape. Yowie is described as being one of the most aggressive Sasquatch species and has been reported ripping the heads off of kangaroos and dogs. In the past, it has been described to be around 7 to 9 feet tall, with a large red mouth and talon-like claws according to Aboriginal legends. It is also noted as having 2 large fang-like canines which distinguish the Yowie from the other Bigfoot species. There are around 140 placental mammals known to exist in Australia, most belonging to the order Chiroptera and Rodentia. Some cryptozoologists theorize that the Yowie could be some form of bipedal marsupial, such as a descendant of the New Guinea Holothurium. Coming in at number 3, we have Mongolian death worm. The Mongolian death worm, also known as its native name, Olgoi korakoi, meaning intestine worm, due to its red blood-like color and size, which is the size of an intestine. It has often been described as around 2 to 7 feet long and possesses the ability to spit out a corrosive yellow saliva and generate blasts of electricity. Mongolian nomads believe the giant worm covers its prey with an acidic substance that turns everything a corroded yellow color. Legend has it that as a creature begins to attack, it raises half of its body out of the sand and starts to inflate until it explodes, releasing the lethal poison all over the victim. It is said that the livestock and humans are its main prey, and because Mongolia had been under Soviet control until 1990, there is very little known about the cryptid. Nobody is entirely sure what the worm actually is, with some experts claiming it to be fake due to the Gobi Desert being too hot an area for annelids to survive. Some have suggested it might be a skink, but they are said to have little legs and scaly skin, whereas witness accounts have specified that the worm is limbless and smooth-bodied. In 2005, an expedition from the Center for Fortean Zoology crossed 1,000 miles of the Gobi on the track of the death worm. They concluded it was likely a large unknown type of worm lizard, and the powers that were attributed to it were apocryphal. Coming in at number 2, we have Ahul. The Ahul, or the Athol, is a winged cryptid often portrayed as a giant bat or even a flying primate depending on the variation. Tales tell of it living in the deepest parts of the jungle of Java and can be found across most of Indonesia. Subspecies can be found on the neighboring islands of New Guinea in the form of the ropen, a presumed cousin to the Ahul. The ropen aptly translates to demon flying and is also said to be a big bat, or more commonly a pterosaur. It is said to produce a light, possibly to attract fish. The ropen is said to have a long snout, large wings, and a long thin crest. It has a distinct face that has features of both a chimpanzee's and a bat's, large dark eyes, red-skinned wings, large claws on its forearms, and is covered in grey fur. It is also noted as having a wingspan of 18 to 28 feet and is said to be the largest bat known to mankind. Now back to the Ahuls. They are said to be covered in a thick brown or black fur much like fruit bats, but unlike bats have a long powerful legs and claws and are supposedly capable of pouncing on and snatching up living prey, including humans. Sightings of these winged beasts are often dismissed simply as mistaken glimpses of owls, eagles, and other large birds of prey that inhabit the rainforests. However, many sources can confirm that the beast does in fact exist, and may even be an isolated and undiscovered species. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Black Shuck. Black Shuck, or Old Shuck, or simply Shuck, is the name given to an unknown creature which is said to roam in East Anglia. It is one of the many ghostly black dogs recorded across the British Isles. The Black Shuck is often recorded as an omen of death, and some occasions a more companionable animal. Although it is classified as a cryptid, there have been various sightings and reports of the animal's appearance throughout the United Kingdom. For centuries throughout England, many have told tales of large black dogs with malevolent flaming eyes are often depicted as red or sometimes green. According to reports, the beast varies in size and stature from that of simply a large dog to being the size of a calf or even a horse. Other accounts report that Black Shuck as floating on a carpet of mist, or even appearing headless. According to folklore, the Shuck haunts East Anglia, primarily coastline, graveyards, side roads, body of water, and dark forest. W.A. Dutt, in his 1901 Highways and Byways in East Anglia, describes the creature, I quote, "He takes the form of a huge black dog and prowls along the dark lanes and lonesome field footpaths where, although his howling makes the hearer's blood run cold, his footfalls make no sound. You may know him at once, should you see him, by his fiery eye. He has but one, and like the Cyclops, is in the middle of his head. but such an encounter might bring you the worst of luck. It is even said that to meet him is to be warned that your death will occur before the end of the year. As I stated before, the Black Shuck has been reported many times, with one of the most notable reports being the appearance at the churches of Bungay and Blyberg in Suffolk. On August 4th, 1957, Black Shuck was said to have burst in through the church doors to a clap of thunder. He ran up to the nave, past a large congregation, killing a man and a boy and causing the church steeple to collapse through the roof. As the dog left, he left scorch marks on the door, which can be seen at the church even to this day.
Number 5. The Loveland Frog. First up on our list is the Loveland Frog, a cryptid that was new to me but is very quickly winning my heart, and maybe he'll steal yours as well. The Loveland Frogman is a mythic humanoid frog that is a legend to the people of Loveland, Ohio, which is where the name comes from. The Frogman is described as a 4-foot bipedal frog, mostly appearing to hide around bodies of water. I mean, it's a frog. Where else is it gonna go? It was first sighted in 1955 by a businessman driving home alone at night. He was headed out towards Branch Hill in Ohio when he saw 3 strange, short, squat, bizarre-looking creatures standing on their hind legs alongside the road. He described them all as being 3 to 4 feet tall with leathery-looking skin and faces just like a frog with giant glowing yellow eyes. The Frogman would go quiet for a bit and wouldn't be seen again until 1972 when a local police officer was driving home and saw an unidentified 4-foot creature running in front of his car's headlights. When he got a good look at it, the officer described it as a leather-skinned bipedal animal crouching like a frog, and it hurriedly ran towards a river. 2 weeks after that sighting, another Loveland police officer reported seeing the same creature, the same little bipedal frog monster. This officer, however, shot at the Frogman and discovered that what he found was a tailless iguana that had grown unusually large. Now, while for some, that was the end of the Frogman legend, there are still sightings and reports to this day. As recent as 2016, people are still claiming that they see the Loveland Frogman. To the people of Loveland, the Frogman is something of a local hero. They love the guy, and I gotta be honest, I sincerely do too. There's something about this cryptid story that's really doing it for me. There's no stories about him eating anybody, the Loveland Frog Monster's not attacking anybody, he's just a happy little frog guy scurrying across the roads. I sincerely hope they're out there. And hey, you having fun on the channel? Drop a subscribe for new scary videos every single day, twice a day. Let's keep on going. Number 4. The Fresno Nightcrawlers. Up next is the Fresno Nightcrawlers, and let me just say right now, these are probably my favorite cryptid on the entire list. If I say another one is, I'm lying. It's these guys. Some cryptids are downright terrifying. Some cryptids will keep you up all night, and maybe these guys will too, but I personally find them downright adorable. These are the Fresno Nightcrawlers, bizarre, rail-thin bipedal creatures with no discernible features whatsoever. The only footage we have of them is blurry security camera footage, which doesn't help identify the creatures much at all. They appear short with very, very long legs, almost stilt-like. The first reported sighting of one of the Nightcrawlers came from a city in California, Fresno, where the name comes from. A man named Jose was at home late at night with his dog trying to get a good night's sleep, but was repeatedly disturbed by his dog barking at something out the window. He went over to quiet his dogs down and noticed something deeply bizarre on his security camera. He saw a pair of white, elongated creatures strolling down his lawn. The next morning he claims to have seen small footprints all over the lawn. The next sighting of the Nightwalkers was in Carmel, also in California. A former Marine and his wife were driving up a hill, and they claimed that they saw a 7-foot tall creature that they described as a thin, pale, armless white humanoid walking on by. What are the Nightwalkers? They're weirding me out. Are they aliens? Cryptid? Possessed pair of pants? If anyone's got a line, you let us know immediately. Whatever the Nightwalkers are, all I know is that I love them. I think they are downright adorable. I watched a clip of them walking down the hill like 30 times while I was writing this script, so just know that. Number 3, Skinwalkers. Now let's shift to one that's not adorable even a little bit. Skinwalkers are an extremely popular cryptid, a person with the ability to shapeshift into any creature they desire. Sometimes the legends state that in order to shapeshift, they need to molt out of their skin, and in some legends, they have to wear the pelt of the animal they intend to shapeshift into. You know, sometimes skinwalkers are presented as monstrous, sometimes humanoid. The recurring lines through every skinwalker stories, though, is that they are absolutely terrifying, and under no circumstances should you ever look one in the eyes, as it's said that looking one in the eyes will not only draw its attention, but seal your fate. So take a listen to this story from Reddit. This post came to us from a Reddit thread asking, what was the scariest thing that has ever happened to you? And an anonymous Redditor shared this story, and it's probably one of the scariest things I've ever read. Beginning. I was a kid when this happened. My uncle and I were finishing up gathering firewood from my grandmother because it was getting dark. We were driving back on a dirt road and I had this awful sense of being watched. Before I could turn to look out my window, my uncle shouted, "Don't." My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest, and I heard a tap on the window. My uncle sped up and started praying in our native language. I didn't know what was going on, and I thought it was over until our truck dipped from the bed. My uncle then started saying, "Look at me and don't turn away," over and over. And then I heard it again, tapping from the window behind me. It was getting harder for me to breathe and I wanted to cry. A minute or two passed and the truck dipped. My uncle looked at me and said, "We'll ask your father to do a prayer in the morning so that the evil will forget our faces." Naturally, other people on Reddit were kind of terrified about that story since it's sending a chill down my spine, and they asked him what he thought it was, and the Redditor said simply that he thought it was possibly a skinwalker. What more is there to say? Number 2. The Flatwood Monster. The Flatwood Monster is another West Virginia native, and I've gotta ask, why are there so many cryptid stories coming out of West Virginia? I've never been there, so maybe somebody can clear this up, because all I know about West Virginia is anything John Denver sang about, and he didn't mention Mothman or the Flatwood Monster, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, the Flatwood Monster is a cryptid that's been thought to be an extraterrestrial in nature. It was reported to be 10 feet tall and roughly 4 feet wide. It's described as wearing some sort of mechanical suit like it's Darth Vader rather than a purely organical being, and its most notable feature is its giant bulbous head with 2 gigantic eyes glowing green. It's got a big cowl in the shape of a spade behind it that makes it look a bit like it's an alien vampire, and its body was thick, armored, and it has small, spindly little arms like a T-Rex. Now, the Flatwood Monster's first sighting dates all the way back to 1952, when 3 local boys saw a shining light falling across the sky, eventually hitting the ground nearby at a local farm. The boys returned home to report that they'd seen a UFO crash land and told one of their moms to get a search party going, and honestly, that is exactly what I would do if I ever saw an alien. I would probably still call my mom, to be honest, if I ever saw an alien. From there, they gathered a small search party to go to the farm to approach what they saw. When they reached the top of the hill, they saw a large pulsating ball of fire and smelled a mist that was making their eyes burn. Someone in the search party noticed 2 small lights and flashed his light quickly at them, revealing a creature standing 10 feet tall with glowing green eyes. The creature hissed at them, then glid upwards and head off into the night. What was the Flatwood Monster? Some skeptics have speculated that those eyes could have been that of a barn owl, and the face does kind of light up. The shadow was disguising it, so it would make sense. But that begs to ask, what was the mist? And what was the thing that fell from the sky? Was the Flatwood Monster an alien? And is it just me, or is the Flatwood Monster just the tiniest bit adorable as well? I know it's kind of terrifying, and its bug eyes are gonna haunt my dreams, but does anyone else think it looks a little huggable? It's shaped like a friend? Number 1. Mothman. Mothman is arguably one of the most famous cryptids of all time, and it's captured our heart since he started flapping around in popularity. Mothman's first ever recorded sighting was in 1966 in West Virginia, when 5 men were in a cemetery prepping for a funeral when they saw something bizarre rustling around in the trees nearby, and lifting off was a massive brown-winged creature that disappeared into the night, far too large and unwieldy to be a bird. From there, the legend of the Mothman began to rise. It would get spotted frequently throughout West Virginia and the surrounding states, but its home is West Virginia. 3 days later, after the first sighting of the Mothman, on November 5th, 1966, another sighting occurred. Roger and Linda Scarberry were driving with their friends, another couple, Steve and Mary Millette, around midnight. While driving, the couples noticed that amidst the darkness, there were glowing eyes that seemed to be hovering around them. They stalled the car a bit, unnerved about who these mysterious eyes could have belonged to, and through the darkness and the headlights of the car, they saw a creature that stood 7 feet tall with leathery wings folded against its back. The creature began to pursue them rapidly, matching the speed of the car at around 100 miles an hour. They tried to turn around to get a better look at the thing, but the creature screeched and flew upwards into the sky when it was hit by its headlights. Now, this would be far from the last sighting of the Mothman. Since these early sightings, Mothman has been reported hundreds of times across West Virginia. He's practically a pillar of the community. I think he's allowed to vote. Some say he's a benevolent figure who wants to help people and warn them of dangers around, whereas others say that he's a more mysterious, nefarious agent, flying around sending people to their doom. There's an allegation that Mothman was involved in the destruction of a bridge in 1967 that led to the death of 40 people. Some survivors claim that they saw the Mothman flying around overhead after the collapse. Whether he's real, a West Virginian legend, a friend, or a foe, there's no denying that like a moth to a flame? Number 5, the Dover Demon. Starting off on our list is the cutest cryptid on this list in my opinion, but still a creepy little freak. I like to start with the cute ones to kind of ease you into it. The Dover Demon first appeared in Massachusetts in the town of Dover, lending it its name. It appears as a spindly little demon kind of looking thing that sort of resembles a little gray, the traditional big-eyed aliens that you see everywhere. The Dover Demon is identified by its blank face, its red glowing eyes, and its hunched quadruped stature. The Dover Demon was first recorded in the late 1970s, discovered by 3 teenagers who were driving through Mass when they saw something bizarre being lit up by their headlights. Initially, they didn't think too much of it until they noticed that the creature in front of them looked more like a human than it did an animal. The driver, one Bill Bartlett, described the creature as resembling a baby with elongated arms, tan, sandpaper-like skin, which was coarse looking, and no nose, ears, or mouth to speak of on its bulbous, enlarged head. Bartlett claims that he only got a good look at it for a few seconds before it vanished off into the night. Now, there are some who speculate that the Dover Demon is capable of rendering itself invisible or camouflaging itself because of the description of this story, and that during daylight it prefers to hide itself in the trees of Dover. Now, bizarrely, I think some skeptics write off the Dover Demon by claiming it was just a baby moose being seen at an odd angle or under strange conditions. And I don't know if I really buy that. I've never seen a baby moose at night in headlights, but I have seen a baby moose. They would have a bulbous head or front-facing eyes, and a baby moose doesn't have that, so I don't know if it's all that. A more pressing question, I think, is if the Dover Demon is a cryptid or perhaps a visitor from another planet, because it does look a lot like the descriptions of the little grays. Now, there's a bigger philosophical question there. Are aliens cryptid? Let me know about that in the comments below. And if you like hearing stories about cryptids and aliens, well, I have some great news, my friend. We got loads of cryptid videos on the channel, so get comfy, click through the playlists, and stay subscribed for something new every day. Number 4, Goatman. Up next on our list of cryptids that'll keep you from sleeping is Maryland's own Goatman. Now, he might look like Mr. Tumnus, but he isn't going to take you to Narnia anytime soon, and there'll be no Turkish delight in your future. Appearing as a half-human, satiric hybrid, the Goatman is thought to roam around Maryland, but he's been sighted in Louisiana and Texas as well. You know, perhaps he gets bored, perhaps he was taking a tour. The Goatman is said to carry a hatchet with him, and not for hacking any lumber. He's been said to be responsible for missing animals around the wooded areas in Maryland. Now, there's a pretty good historical precedent for goats involved in mythology, with satyrs as a mythical historical cryptid, and goats have been associated with Satan and demons for generations. But the Goatman himself has got a pretty rich history in Maryland folklore. Depending on who you ask, he's either just a cryptid Goatman who wanders the woods, or if that's not satisfying enough for you, one particularly colorful origin for the Goatman is that it's the product of a mad scientist's experiment who was experimenting with goats, and when it went astray, the Goatman broke loose and started attacking passersby with an axe. I really like this one, and I choose to believe it's 100% factual. The Goatman is a pretty popular folk story with teenagers, with urban legends describing the beast hunting down those who are looking to spend a little quality time at Lover's Lane. It said he'll come and bleat ya. Bleat, like beat. It's a goat pun. It was pretty bad. Do goats do that, or is this sheep? I'm not sure. You know what? I shouldn't be practicing here. We're gonna move on from this. The Goatman still hasn't been seen as much in recent years, and I sincerely hope that he's still out there. Number 3, Qualpalic. The Qualpalic, or the Qualipiluit, is an indigenous cryptid, with most stories emanating from Nunavut, Canada, and Alaska in the United States. The Qualpalic is described as appearing vaguely humanoid, but having scaly and bumpy skin, and long, stringy, disgusting black hair. They are described as being disgustingly ugly and that they reek of sulfur, and I think it's worth noting that you cannot find a single artist's depiction of these things that don't make them just look like vomitatiously gross. Interestingly, the creature is predominantly described as being a female monster, although some local variations of the stories exist where it is described as a male creature, but most tales revolving it describe it as a lady monster. The Qualpalic is a bit of an icy boogeyman, snatching up children who misbehave, waiting around thin ice to crack up and drag those children down into freezing cold water. It's thought that the origin of this creature was first told as a story for practical purposes, as a pretty good way to get kids to not walk on thin ice is to tell them that they'll be grabbed by a gross ice demon. Allegedly, when they grab a child, they stuff them inside their leather burlap sacks, then scurry back downwards into the water. It's said that you can hear a knocking under the ice as a last warning that they're about to strike. Now maybe this is just a personal experience I had, and maybe some of you also had this as a little kid, but I was read a children's book called A Promise is a Promise, a Robert Munch classic, that featured a Qualapalak as a villain that was trying to get a little girl to bring her younger siblings to the Qualapalak as a little snack, and it terrified me so much. I didn't even live anywhere near thin ice and I was scared about it. Scared me bad. Wiry black hair and sunken little eyes got me. Maybe it's not relatable at all, but I thought I would share that. I definitely didn't spend any time near thin ice afterwards. Number 2, the Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil is a fairly popular cryptid and has been subject to all sorts of sightings and stories since the early 1700s. And I bet you can't guess where it usually shows up. That's right. California. Nope, New Jersey. The Jersey Devil is commonly described as manifesting itself as a chimeric creature with a horse's head, bat wings, a snake-like tail, and hooves. There's an interesting folktale that says that the Jersey Devil was brought into our world when a woman was stressed out over her 13th pregnancy. Good lord, yeah, I would be too at my 13th pregnancy. Okay. She was nervous because apparently this pregnancy felt different, and I guess if she had 12 others, she'd really know. She said that she felt like the baby that was inside her was the devil. When she was ready to deliver her little newborn, instead of a happy little baby, the Jersey Devil was born, flew out into the night, and then spent the next 250 years terrorizing the New Jersey swampland. The creature is deeply rooted in local folklore, and to be honest, it's kind of beloved around Jersey. It serves as the name for the New Jersey Devils, and it worms its way into all sorts of pop culture, games, movies, TV, music. They love them over there. For years, there have been stories and sightings around New Jersey describing a kangaroo-like creature with glowing red eyes hunting on small animals in the surrounding areas, and lots of blurry photos of bizarre hybrid-looking creatures running around the countryside. There have even been hunts and bounties posted for the Jersey Devil with rewards for its capture. So is the Jersey Devil real, or just a beloved local legend? Number 1, the Hat Man. Rounding off our list is our most recent cryptid on this list, and a piece of modern folklore that is already making a lasting legacy. The Hat Man is a shadow person, or at least thought to be. Everyone who's seen the Hat Man has described almost the same thing exactly, most concerningly. A spindly, shadowy figure that appears to be wearing a hat. Sometimes a fedora, sometimes a top hat, but everyone describes him as wearing an old, out-of-date style, so you're not going to see him in a shadowy snapback anytime soon. He always appears fairly towering, and you can't see his face. It's obscured, or just not present, and the only thing you're truly able to make out are his pinprick red eyes poking out of the shadows watching you. Depending on who you ask based on the sightings, the Hat Man can be considered somewhat benign. Maybe. It's usually reported that the Hat Man appears to people who are suffering from sleep paralysis or insomnia, and most claims of Hat Man describe him as just watching, observing, studying, or whatever. I honestly don't know if that's better than it attacking you. However, it's not all just stories of nighttime stalking. There are some who claim that when they've been visited by the Hat Man, that he's jumped them or choked them, or they felt burning sensations on their scalps or their chest. Although some say he's just watching you for I don't want to know why. There are many who believe that he feeds off your negative emotions, and perhaps this is how he satiates himself. It's said that people who are visited by Hat Man are those who are already struggling with something emotionally resonating. Sometimes people in the same family even report seeing the Hat Man in similar occurrences, so does he target specific groups of people? Or is it just certain emotions he hungers for? The Hat Man is shrouded in mystery, and even just thinking about him is enough to make my hair stand on end and start eyeing the coat rack in my room just a little suspiciously when I turn the lights off. Number 5, Snow Wasset. Coming up first on our list of icy cold little critters is the Snow Wasset, a fearsome, legless little cryptid and a local one to boot, so I had to include it. Anything that comes from the greater Canada area is a big deal for me. It winters by the Great Lakes and the Hudson Bay, and in the rest of the year crawls up to Newfoundland and Labrador. Totally the wrong time of year, buddy. You gotta go to Newfoundland in the winter for Jig's dinner. Anyway, a Snow Wasset is like a weasel. It's a long, furry creature, except it has no legs. Except in the summertime, where it does have legs and also turns green. If I was a biologist, I would love to get my hands on this thing and figure that out. That particular part of the lore of this creature is really fascinating to me. Why would a creature shed its legs like baby teeth? What cruel joke of evolution is that? It's like a mammal sandworm. Anyway, I gotta move on. When it's in its legless, winterized form, it burrows deep beneath the snow and ambushes its prey by surprise and drags them into the frozen underground. Absolutely horrifying. A frozen, legless, enormous, furry little snake is not pleasant by any definition. A wasset is said to be 4 times as large as a wolverine and 40 times as hungry, requiring a vast amount of meat to keep it sustained. Doesn't shed enough calories shedding those legs. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm so hung up about this, my ghouls, but I am. Maybe it's because there's not actually that much information about the snow wasset out there. Sightings and stories about it date back mostly hundreds of years, and there haven't been too much buzz about them ever since. Perhaps they're extinct. Or perhaps they've all just burrowed under too deep where I can't see them. Either way, the only thing that really stood out for me is they turn green and have no legs, so I'm gonna keep banging on that. And hey, when it's this cold outside, what do you really need to go out for? Stay inside, order some food, turn the heat up, and keep watching Top 5 Scary for the rest of the night. And while you're there, maybe think about tossing a subscribe your way if it's not too much trouble. Number 4, the Nucklavi. Coming up next on this list is the Nucklavi, a cryptid that I had never heard of before researching for this video, so I hope it's new to you too and you get to learn something cool. The Nucklavi is an old Nordic myth, a demon of the sea appearing as a horrifying demonic, part horse, part man, part thing hybrid. Seriously, this thing is disgusting. It looks like somebody glued a bunch of leftover horse parts and man parts together, and it's completely skinless, leaving its exposed flesh to all the elements to see. Kinda looks like one of those behind the scenes videos of how they make McDonald's chicken nuggets, you know? The Nucklavi is said to be trapped in the sea during the warmer months of the year, and then come winter is set free to wreak all kinds of havoc. This thing is pure evil, destroys just by breathing. The horsey head part emits toxic fumes just by opening its wretched maw, and this vapor causes crops to wilt, people to fall ill, and drought soon follows after. I see why they keep this thing locked up for most of the year, because it kinda sounds like a royal nuisance. It's thought that the Nucklavi was first created by old Nordic storytellers as a way of rationalizing and explaining away things like drought and plague destroying the harvest. It's much easier to put a face to your problems, and when that problem is a wretched flayed horseman, it's easy to get angry at that. When stories of the Nucklavi were told, it was thought to be so evil that its name was always said in a hushed whisper for fears of speaking too loudly of it could attract its attention. Oh, I wish I knew that about 2 minutes ago. I just said its name like 16 times very loudly. It's said that if you're ever to encounter the dread Nucklavi to find the nearest fresh body of water. This sickly creature of the sea is deathly afraid of fresh water, I guess. You'd think a creature with all that skin exposed wouldn't like salt water or the cold, but hey, there you go, to each their own. You do you, terrifying skinless monster horseman. Number 3, a Chenu. A Chenu is an Algonquin creature of folklore, a bit similar to a Wendigo, but with some fun regional twists. While both creatures hunt in wooded northern areas, and are both commonly associated with the wintertime, a Wendigo is usually depicted as a stretched out, emaciated monster, whereas a Chenu is depicted as being massive, very furry, and only getting larger and larger the more it eats. Actually, reading that back now, I realize that's not terribly impressive. Most things get larger and larger as they eat. Much like a Wendigo though, a Chenu is thought to have been formerly a man who was turned into a beast, either through their greedy ways, refusing to feed the starving, or for those who give in to the darkest of temptations and consume human flesh willingly. A Chenu is described as looking like a cross between an old man and a beast, large and imposing in appearance, with big chunks of their own flesh missing, possibly self-inflicted. They cover themselves in the forest, hiding themselves with leaves, bark, snow, pine needles, until they look like a horrible lint roller of the woods that walks upright. Interestingly, unlike a Wendigo, it's thought that the process of turning into a Chenu can actually be reversed. There's some good news. In some folk tales, the way to cure a Chenu is a special medicine that can cause them to vomit up their frozen heart and vomit up the flesh that they've consumed, causing the afflicted to revert back to their human form in a sight that is no doubt disgusting for everybody. But if this isn't possible, if you don't have this medicine on hand, or it's just not feasible to trick a Chenu, you can also get it to eat salt, which will apparently melt it from the inside. Poor Chenu. You're forced to live a tormented existence as a snow monster, isolated from your former friends, doomed to hunt on your former species, consuming only the darkest meat available, and you can't even order a little bit of salt for your dinner, eating a totally flavorless diet. I got nothing but sympathy for you, Chenu. Number 3, Kamataichi. I think it's really fascinating what each culture's cryptids look like, you know? Each culture creates cryptids and they all put their fun little spins on it, and whenever I get to make these videos, I learn all sorts of really cool mythological stuff that I'd never heard of before, and I sincerely hope you get that out of these videos too. I'd never heard of this next one, the Kamataichi, but I am obsessed with it now. Coming to us from Japan, this yokai, which is like a Japanese type of demon, appears like a weasel except with razor sharp sickle-like claws, like a real-life Sneasel from Pokemon. I'm actually amazed there's no Pokemon directly based on a Kamataichi. They seem like perfect for it. They have spiny fur fur, similar to a hedgehog, like prickly little needles, but they bark like a dog, and their claws could not be any sharper, and they're sickle-shaped. And also, a lot of depictions of them are downright adorable. These funny little creatures are extremely lightweight and have learned how to ride the currents of the wind to travel. They honestly sound kind of like radical in like a California surfer way. The legends of the Kamataichi come out of the Chubu region of Japan, when vicious cold winds were so powerful they would cut people down directly. And these legends would take the form of the spirit called the Kamataichi, which was the winds themselves as this furry little miscreant. It would attack at your legs, causing you to fall down, exposed and helpless, while it sucked at your blood. It's said that no blood occurs from their woundings because of this, as a Kamataichi moves so quickly and sucks it all up. That's almost considerate of it, doesn't leave a stain. These creatures move so quickly, and they're so good at hiding, that they're apparently completely invisible to the naked eye, appearing as nothing more than a sharp, freezing wind on your skin. Amusingly, there's some debate as to whether or not a Kamataichi's true origin is actually nothing more than a silly pun. There's a stance samurai would use called a kamaitachi, translating loosely to sword stance, which would explain, you know, it's a sharp thing. I don't know where the stance comes in, but it's sharp. However, there are legends all throughout Japan, throughout many regions, all telling stories of creatures that ride the wind and attack humans, and the sickle weasel remains among the most popular and among the most adorable. Sorry, Kamataichi, you are just so cute. If anybody knows where to get like a stuffed toy of this little guy, please comment under the video. I need to know. Number 1, the Yeti. Coming in at the number 1 spot, a mainstay of any trip to the mountain, the Yeti. I mean, who else could possibly take the number 1 spot on a list about winter cryptids? Maybe Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Does he count as a cryptid? I guess he was. Maybe he's more like a mutant. Anyway, a Yeti is an American manufacturer specializing in outdoor products such as ice coolers, vacuum insulated drinkware, and I'm reading the wrong one. Sorry. Let's do that again. A Yeti refers to an ape-like creature thought to live in the mountains in the Himalayas, standing upright like a man and walking on 2 legs, and is usually pretty big, like 8 feet tall, with long arms, broad feet, and long brownish hair and sunken eyes. It kind of sounded a bit like me, to be honest. While it's pretty common to draw a Yeti as just being like a big giant white gorilla, they're actually pretty different, and most traditional depictions of a Yeti color it with darker fur. They're probably one of the oldest cryptids out there that's still talked about so fondly, with stories of Yetis going all the way back to 326 BC, when Alexander the Great sought out to capture one to see for himself while he was conquering the Indus Valley, although he was told that no Yeti could survive at an altitude low enough to meet him, and Alexander wept, for there were no more Yetis left to conquer. It's got several names. It's sometimes called a Sasquatch, or in the West it's popularly referred to as an abominable snowman, although that's a term by British officers who were stationed in the Himalayas, as no natives to the region call it that. The name Yeti possibly comes from the Tibetan words Yete, meaning a man-like animal, or from Meti, meaning bear in some Nepalese and Tibetan dialects, which would make a good bit of sense, as it's thought that a number of Yeti sightings over the years that led to it being such a widely recognized cryptid could actually just be bear sightings being mistaken in the frosty air. In fact, there's a theory that Yeti sightings are from hybrid polar bears that had bred with grizzly bears, which has been recorded to happen, just not really anywhere where Yeti sightings are really made, so kinda up in the air. In Sherpa tradition, it's said that a Yeti is a powerful, mystical being, and a Yeti can choose to whom it will make itself visible to, choosing to only appear to those who believe in it. So if you're ever trekking the Himalayas and worried about an attack, here's a little advice for you: just don't believe in it. Although there are a good number of people who believe that the Yeti are an intelligent enough species that just want to be left alone to their own devices, living